Welcome to Rise with AI, the podcast that spotlights trailblazers in e-learning and professional training, inspiring you to reach new heights, create impact, scale your vision, and empower others. I'm your host, and today we're joined by Beth Jones, founder of Empowered Survivors, a platform dedicated to helping individuals heal from trauma and fear-based emotions through her transformative Heal framework. Beth, it's an honor to have you. Let's dive in with a fun question to get started. Your work is so deeply tied to healing and hope. What's a small everyday ritual that keeps you grounded and inspired?
Hello. Thank you for having me on the show. I'm very happy to be here with you. A daily ritual that I do that keeps me grounded in hope and fosters hope, keeps me building hope. It's sort of the fuel that keeps us going in life. And for me, one of the primary things that I try to do every day is to connect with nature because there's so much peace and beauty in nature.
Honestly, I love that piece. Nature is just abundant and it's all over us, but not every one of us we get to spend the conscious time to be out in nature. So thanks for sharing that. And I would love to touch on your journey from forensic accounting to founding Empowered Survivors. What was actually the defining moment that sparked this transformation, and how did it shape your mission to help others?
It's a life-altering event about 5 years ago. It was actually a hypnotherapy session that I went to, and I went for, sort of a generic, benign reason. The reason why I went to hypnotherapy is because I was having difficulty connecting at a very deep level with people, but I had no idea what I was going to discover in that session and then what my path would be for the next 5 years after that. So in that session, I became consciously aware of some events in my life previously that had been separate and fragmented in the way that I stored them in my brain. And in the hypnotherapy, those events all came together and painted a picture for me of some difficult things that I've been through in my life and had lived with. And so that was a life and it was a death and rebirth event for me. So the person who walked into that room that day died, and this me, the me I was always meant to be, walked out. And I spent, the next 2 years really taking off many masks that I wore that kept me from being who I'm actually meant to be. And my purpose in life is now to live my mission, which is to do the work I do as the healing mentor, which means I had to have a radical shift in my professional work. And now my journey has led me to share my story very publicly.
Wow. And you actually mentioned, you use the term survivors in your work. Who are the survivors you actually aim to reach with your Heal framework? I'd just love to hear also what kind of challenges do they usually fear?
Every single one of us is a survivor, and that's because every human being on this planet has faced some sort of trauma or abuse. And I think about it, technically, if you hear clinicians talk about it, you may hear them talk about big T, big trauma, and little t, little trauma. I have similar words when I think about it. I think about the big macro events that we experience, which would be the things that some of your listeners and viewers may be thinking about in terms of events that people encounter that cause them to say, I've been through a trauma or even an abuse. But I know from my own experience that trauma and abuse can show up in our day-to-day interactions with people who are challenging, people who are difficult, or our relationships are strained. From my own perspective and my own experience, I went through much of that with my husband, who's now my ex-husband. And it's the example that I like to give about what this looks like, because for years I experienced what I consider to be the micro traumas, and it was sort of the daily interactions that were painful to me. So it might be, sort of a look or a comment, something that he would do or say that was hurtful to me and put pain in my heart. And over time, I endured that on a regular basis. And over time, and because of my healing journey, I ended up then experiencing something more challenging, which I think people would put in the category of the bigger trauma. And that is getting divorced and having to come to the point where that decision is made and then go through the divorce process itself. And then afterward, there's also some pain. So I think that's a good example of how we live daily with the little traumas, and then we also experience the bigger traumas, right?
And you briefly mentioned about redefining love. So can you walk us through the process, how you actually guide your clients or your healing journey, how you actually redefine that love for yourself?
So the word heal for me is an acronym that means to hope, evolve, and love. And that's because hope evolving, and love are three essential elements in the healing journey. And so love is at the end because ultimately that's what we're after. But you have to go through a process of living in a hope-filled life, evolving as a human being, growing, become your high version of yourself at any moment in time. And part of that is understanding yourself at a deep level so that you are then able to really love yourself, despite all of the reasons that we sometimes don't love ourselves. But what I discovered on my journey is that notion of self-love, and finding self-love first is crucially important to then being able to actually show up in and love other people.
And could you also share a story about how a particular client story or in your healing journey that really illustrate the impact of your heal framework?
The core story, the foundational story is my own story, right? But I know as I have worked with other people, it just resonates, right? I mean, the understanding, in the way that I talk about it. I mean, you can't go through the process that I've been through without fueling yourself through hope, right? Because if you don't have hope, you're not going to move forward. You become paralyzed by that despair or that lack of hope. And I've been in that place where I was in deep despair. And even though I'm a very hopeful person, I had lost all hope. And that for me was connected to coming out of hypnotherapy and having this stark realization that I literally had no idea who I actually am. And then, my own journey was a deep, deep self-discovery process. And so when I think about evolving, it's in two parts. So it's taking all of the tools and resources that are available to us from a healing perspective. And that's everything from people who are in your tribe that you trust as confidants that you can speak to, a support group, books that I've read, spending time out in nature, my spirituality, a lot of trauma therapy. I do a lot of somatic movement therapy, inner child work. It's a whole host of different types of tools and resources that I use together to work for me to then help me to be able to walk this path of deep self-discovery, right? Many of us are in a place where we're living our lives in very unhealthy ways. And part of that deep self-discovery work is coming to terms with that and then shedding it, letting it go, right? Deep self-discovery work and a journey to understand what do I need emotionally to feel like a whole and complete person, and where am I getting that, either from myself or from other people who I'm close to that are in my circle. And things like looking at my gifts and my strengths. What am I really good at, right? So there are things, and that's true for all of us, there are things in our lives that we're really good at. And so learning those things about ourselves and coming to terms with them is that deep evolution, right? So that I can really reposition or shed the things that really aren't working for me anymore, and then take on the things that are me and that do work for me. And ultimately, that allows me to see myself for the person who I truly am, to accept myself as a survivor and accept all the ways, all the things that I did that weren't great. Maybe I hurt other people, and I did throughout my lifetime, and that was part of being a survivor. But I'm able to give myself grace and accept myself as a survivor. And for me, when that happens, I'm like, oh, well, if I'm a survivor, then all these people, if I'm a survivor that hurt myself and other people, well, doesn't that mean that people who have hurt me are probably just survivors acting out of their own place of being unhealed, right? There's a phrase out there that we've all heard, hurt people hurt people, but I like to say healed people heal people. And so doing the work to accept people who are hurt, that are hurting other people because they are hurt, and then doing the work to become healed so that you can heal yourself and other people, is that evolution. And that whole process opens up the entire avenue of then being able to really learn how to love. What is love? How do you show up in love in your important relationships, which for a survivor, we do have to figure out, because love is something that's probably been missing, and true love has been missing from our lives. And we have sometimes warped and skewed ideas about what love is because of our experiences. And so learning what it truly is and then being able to give and receive is part of that process, right? And so if you understand what I'm saying to you, I'm talking about healing and a healing journey. I haven't said to you, go do this one thing or go do these two things, right? I mean, and I don't think there is any one thing. I think it's a combination of actions that we must take that come together that help us to heal. The combination is completely unique. Well, that means we need our own unique path to heal. And so what I help people to do is to figure out, what is that path for you? The other thing that I think happens, and has been my experience, is the different healing modalities that we're supposed to engage with. The hypnotherapy, it's a great example. Let's keep going with that. I think if someone is meant to to engage in hypnotherapy, a hypnotherapist will show up in their life somewhere, right? So I don't think it's, oh, hypnotherapy worked for her, so I'm now going to go search the internet and see who I can find, and I'm going to go try it. I don't, it does work that way. And I have had that experience when I was pinpointing very specific things that I was looking for. But my experience has also been that those people just show up in our lives. So someone that you know will introduce you and say, oh, I had this experience, or I met this person, or you might be at an event and you meet someone that does something that resonates with you. Right? So I feel like, and I know from my own experience that that journey is orchestrated by the universe, by spirit, by God, and it's divinely led for all of us. And those tools and resources will show up. I might plant the seed, but I only plant the seed so that someone is now in their mind looking for what might work for them. And those things I believe will up.
Yeah, and you mentioned just allowing the universe to give you signs. So when you're actually open to receive, because you mentioned about love being, we are always giving out love, but also sometimes we forget that we should also invite love and also receive love. And perhaps once you actually open up for the universe to receive, and then these signs start to come out, I think that's very brilliant, because instead of us, the universe wants us to heal. And so when we are ready, signs will appear in front of us.
That's why love starts with self-love, because we are the most important person that we need to love. And when we've gone through, whatever experiences we've had in our life, it can be hard to love yourself. And I think if most people really think about themselves and how they treat themselves, right? Two great examples are the notion of imposter syndrome or an inner critic, right? And so if you're being able to accept that person, right? And then I've experienced a very loud inner critic that I call the wretched abuser, because nobody can talk to me and abuse me like I can when I'm in that state. All those things that we do in our own mind to ourselves. And so those are the types of things that is not self-love, right? And learning to be able to manage things like that is how we begin to love ourselves, giving ourselves love and then receiving love back from ourselves, and then learning to carry that into relationships with others who we want to have in our life.
I
Yeah.
love that. Yeah, it seems what I understand from you is that once we actually understand the power of our thoughts, and then we can also truly be able to have the power regained back to us, and that we can also start our healing journey from there.
Right.
And Beth, you mentioned doing some very powerful family constellation work recently. Can you
Yes.
share more? Can
Yeah.
you share more about how that experience impacted or informed the healing work that you do?
One of the things that I'm clearly meant to be doing in this world, my purpose, my mission, what the universe wants me to be doing, is to experience different healing modalities so that I can share it with people, right? And help people to say, oh, I might want to try that. Or as I said before, no, that's not for me, right? And I don't like to actually talk about a modality until I've experienced it, right? Because I need to know what I'm talking about. Right? And that's just, part of my makeup and my design. So I think when we first met, I had mentioned to you I was about to do family constellations work, which I've now had my first session. I did an individual session. I'm going to do a group session in a couple of weeks. So, I understood family constellations. You can read about it, and conceptually, when you read about it, in a group setting is how they, at least what I found so far, that's how they describe it. But they talk about being in a situation where, you as the person who's constellating chooses people from the group who become stand-ins for family members. And like, you don't know why you're not like, oh, I'm going to go choose somebody in the audience for my mom. That's not how it works. But you are led spiritually to go choose somebody from the audience who takes a role in your family constellation, your family unit. And then you dialogue about your feelings and like what emotion, what feeling, what's coming up in you, what's happening for you as you're choosing this person, and then bringing them wherever you're going to place them in the room, right? And then they may dialogue back with you. And when I first read that, I was like, I don't really understand how that works, right? It's kind of confusing to me, but I had this draw to it. So I work with a group of doctors on a different type of healing modality that's sort of energy in the body is what they deal with. And one of them does family constellation work, and I trust them and I like her. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to try it with you. So I did an individual session. She works with cards in the individual session, and they're colored cards. So I have this stack of colored cards, and I just let spirit lead me. I wasn't like intentionally choosing from the card, like this is the card I'm going to choose first and let's see what happened, right? So there was me, looking the card stacks on my left side, and I'm looking over to my other side and pulling the card out, right? And then I would lay it on the floor. And what I'll tell you about that experience, and I was dialoguing what was happening to me in terms of the feeling, the emotions, the words that I was saying, and then, like different imagery that was happening in my mind as I was laying the cards out. I have a photo of it, and I'm actually going to write about this. And I'll record about it, the visual part of it. I'll have an episode on my show about this because it was just so profound and so cool. But what I understand from it now is that the purpose of it really is to reorder our position in our family, right? And because each of us, as a member of our family, we take on roles quite often that are not ours. We're sort of out of alignment. So a great example is, and this was my situation for some years, if you're an older sibling and you might become the parental figure in some ways for younger siblings, even though your parents are still there and involved, whatever the family dynamics are, and particularly if there's dysfunction in the family, might cause you as the older sibling to take on a parental role. Well, that's not your role. That's not your role as a child
Right.
in the family unit, right? You're the child. You're not supposed to take on the parenting role. So it's about moving the energy and karmically being able to reorder people, right? And so it's things like if people were in wartime, or there's dysfunction in the family, there's some sort of an addiction, there might be a miscarriage, a missing family, like a missing being in the family tree from a miscarriage or an abortion. So things like that can show up and sort of reorder. And it was a really powerful and profound experience for me. I was blown away, which, these things for me, because I am very spiritual and so open to what the universe is trying to communicate to me and how the universe is helping me to heal through these experiences. It was phenomenal. I mean, it was just amazing what happened and what I learned. Um, and then I was told just to leave it alone, right? To let the karmic shift, to let the universe work on the reordering. I guess I would explain it as me being like the gateway to start to open it up, to
Yeah.
free the disorder that's in the family constellation, right? And I've
Yes.
had a lot of healing experiences already, some other things that I've done that are healing soul to soul with people who have hurt me, or, at our spirit level. I did all of the healing with my grandfather, who was the first person who abused me. I was sexually abused by him when I was 5 years old. He died 20 years before my healing journey began. And so I've healed my entire relationship with him karmically, right? And I've had some very profound, deeply spiritual experiences that I've talked about, I've written about it and talked about some of them. And I believe that my journey to heal that relationship with him is complete, including the last event that we had, or the karmic work that we did. I believe that I was able to hopefully release his soul from whatever bondage his soul may have been in because of his influence in my life and other family members' lives, right? So I do a lot of this work anyhow. And so it was very natural for me to be in this place and to see it happening. But to then be able to say in reality, well, this is what all of this represents. I mean, it's even the color and the placement of the cards, right, was just phenomenal. And I have, because I have some family members that are in muted colors, and I kept talking about them being weak or dying. And when I think about them in reality, once I knew who they were, who they represented, that is true. And then there's a whole host of us that are in these really bright, bold colors, including the card that I picked for myself is literally my absolute number one favorite color. So my favorite color generally is blue. Shade of blue that I love the most was the card that I drew. And when I pulled it, I was like, oh, it's me. Right. And of course it was me. Right. So it's things like that. And then, another example I can give you of something very profound is I have muted colors for family members that I understand why they're the muted colors. These bold colors for those of us who I understand why we're the bold colors. I drew one white card and I placed the white card over those of us, the bold colors. And I talked about it in terms of this other experience that I've had in my healing journey, where I have my own healing modality that I use when I'm dealing with difficult people and difficult conversations in order to be able to filter my emotion and then filter my emotion out and filter the emotion in that's coming from them. Again, all in notion of being in love-based emotions. So keeping out anger, for example, when I'm speaking my words or when their words are coming into me, not taking their anger into myself, right? So it's just a visualization exercise that I'll put myself through when I'm going into a difficult conversation. But there's a dove associated with that. And I visualized myself putting my words onto the wings of this dove and flying out to deliver my message to other people. And I had a white card that I pulled. And when I did, I placed it over the people in my family who I have the most difficulty communicating with. I didn't know that's what I was doing at the time. And I was talking about, oh, that's the dove. That's peace. That is the calm that I'm trying to bring into my communicate, like in the family unit, right? And that's what it was. So it was just, was a profound experience, deeply spiritual, but so on point with me and the healing journey that I'm trying to go through for myself, but also as a facilitator of healing within my family, right? So it was so cool, so amazing. And I'm super excited to do the group session because I understand how the group session is going to work. Right now, the people that I choose take the place of those cards, and I understand what happens. So when I'm dialoguing, I'm going to say what I feel, but the way it works in the group therapy is that if that person is led to say something, they will put those words back out. And I may not understand what they're saying. They might not understand what they're saying, but the person facilitating, who is gifted in being able to sort of interpret the message will be able to tell me. Right. So it's amazing. And I'm so excited that I did it. And I'm really excited for my group session, which is in a couple of weeks. So thank you for
Wow,
asking about that. Yeah, it's cool.
that's really awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
I went for a few sessions and it's just like you mentioned, mind blowing and mind boggling. Like you don't have to understand, but just trust the process. And then afterwards, you look back and you realize, hey, yeah, of course we are doing that. But yeah, that's very interesting. So thank you for sharing that with the audience.
So can I ask you on the work that you've done, because I've been told just sit still and let the energy flow. Because I have some questions about certain events that may or may not have happened in my family as a
Yeah.
result of the work. But I was told don't go there, right? Just let it be. And so that's what I'm trying to do. And so my question for you is that let it be and let the energy work. Have you felt that? Have you seen it moving in your family?
Yes, so I went through and now 3 different sessions, and they are all different person. One of the session I vividly remember that I went to resolve one of the relationship with one family members, but at the same time another situation came up with I have no idea what was going on, but the more that we were engaging in a group setting, then afterwards the facilitator will ask and prompt questions, and then realize that hey, I'm actually right now healing another part of the family first, and maybe this energy is not ready yet. So it took a few sessions to actually really understood clearly what went on. But like you mentioned, it's really very profound. It's also hard to describe in with words because the energy that you feel it is definitely the feeling of relief, and that was gone just after one session.
And one thing I would also like to point out that I think is cool. So where were you? What country were you in when you did the family constellation work?
Yes, I did it in Singapore. So my first facilitator, she was from Australia, and then the subsequent ones, I think she was from UK, and then the last is Singapore.
So I'm in the US, and so I think it's very cool that the modalities, the healing modalities that we're talking about, and everything that I've mentioned is available to anybody anywhere in the world, right? I mean, what we deal with, the trauma and abuse that we take on, our human experiences are human experiences. And I tell people it doesn't matter, there's no demographic identifiers that say you're more likely or less likely to experience trauma and abuse, right? You're human. Yeah. And this demonstrates that, right? Because you and I are in different parts of the world and different nationalities. And I think it's cool that even a healing modality that is sort of, more new age and something new that people are trying and working on around family constellations is available around the world, right? So that I think it's cool. I just wanted to point that out to the audience, right? That you're listening to me talk about family constellations, like, oh, but you're in the US. Can I do that? Well, yeah, you might be able to, right? Because if you're in Singapore, the answer is definitely yes, right?
All
So
across the
just
globe, yeah.
all across the globe. That's right. Yeah, that's exactly right.
So
Yeah,
true. I love to actually take the conversation to also highlight about your business and also your future missions. You recently launched your masterclass, and I think that's a major milestone. What strategies have you actually used to develop and reach out to more survivors?
That's a great question, and thank you for highlighting this for me. My journey to do my work as the healing mentor has just evolved, right? It's part of the path that I've walked. Again, trying to listen to the universe, God, what the divinely led path is and how I'm meant to engage with people. And I do know from my journey that everything is in God's time, not my time. And so I've had to be very open to that and listen, pay attention, right? And you don't always get it right. We feel very strongly about building something, and then the launch of it may take longer than you thought it was going to take, something like that, right? As being in God's timing. But I do know it is perfect timing. I've had to completely reinvent myself, right? I mean, everything about me, um, I've completely reinvented and rebranded myself. And this is a radical professional transformation that I've been through, right? Going from what I used to do to where, I worked for large organizations, and, now here I am. Yeah, I'm a solopreneur at this point, just trying to figure out how to get people to help me, right? But a lot of it is about the creative aspect of building my platform, right? And so that really began with me understanding my story, having the right people come into my life to be coaches, and guides for me in the work that I needed to do. So a great example was I hired a woman to help me go through a 12-month process to create my book. And I self-published. And so she took me everything from the process of creating the framework, that the structure of the book itself. She did everything but the writing. She helped me with everything but the writing, right? And even some of the writing she helped with, because she would review and, give me feedback. But she took me through the process of structuring the book, writing the book, and then going through editorial process, my cover design, and the whole process, launching, the whole process of getting it out to the world. And she had heard me talk. I knew her from, and that's an interesting story. My whole journey about bringing my story out is a cool story in and of itself. It's a cool micro story within my own journey, my own broader story. But I had met her, she had known me for reasons for about a year before we started working together on my solo book, right? I had met her. I wrote a chapter in a book before that, and that's where I had met her, is on that project. And so she had heard me talk about heal, right? And that the word heal for me was an acronym to me that meant to hope, evolve, and love. She had heard me talk about that for a long time, right? And that started resonating with me probably about a year after my healing journey began. When I'm structuring the book, right, and I'm trying to figure out what goes into it, and I have all these ideas about what I want to be in the book, and I spent 2 days with her in an intensive session that's meant to create a writing plan. And I have all these post-it notes up on this board on our first day, writing all my ideas, and she's just letting me ideate, and we're talking through things, and she's asking me questions. And at some point in time, she was like, the structure of this book is heal, hope, evolve, and love. And when she said that, it was literally like I could see the post-it notes just like start rearranging themselves. These are about hope. These are about evolving. These are about love. And it just became so crystal clear. And in fact, that became the structure of the book, right? Well, that has led me to now recognize the fact that that is an approach, my proprietary approach, that was ideating in me, that I was creating, now the way that I teach people, right? And so, that's just the story about developing what is now known as my heal framework. And that's the approach that I use to teach and mentor people about how to get down this road themselves, to build their own skill set to heal, right? But I had no idea when that acronym first popped into my mind that that's where I was going. I've just followed the path as it's naturally evolved. I've looked for people, right? And every moment when I've needed someone to step into my life to be the person to carry me to the next place, that person has shown up. And these are the micro stories that I have in my own broader story, right? And Lynette, my coach, the woman I just talked about, is a prime example of that, right? And so, and that has just continued for me, right? I've now, I've launched my own podcast. I have my own YouTube channel, my own show, Let's Heal with Beth Jones. You can find on YouTube. I'm on Apple Podcasts and Spotify as well. And there's a whole micro story around that, around the right people saying the right things to me at the right time, help me go, oh, they're like epiphanies. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then I start to walk down the path. And, I have to say, I'm very intentional now about trying to figure out whether or not an idea that comes into mind is mine from my ego, or does it come from God? It really is the universe saying to me, this is what you need to be doing, right? And so there are things that I do to focus on that. I meditate on it. I pray. I look for a repeat of signs. The resources that I need have to be there. Really, what I would say to you is it has to be an easy process. And I would say to you that writing my book was an easy process. Launching my show, managing my show is an easy process. I do virtually all of the management, the recording of my show, the production, the video production. I do have somebody that helps me with that, but actually getting it out, putting it on the platforms, writing the show notes, a lot of the graphics that go with it. I do a lot of that myself because it's very personal to me and it's important. It's one of the primary ways that I put my healing message into the world, right? But it's easy. right? And I don't feel constrained either from time or idea standpoint about having to produce my show and to do that, right? And so it's things like that that I pay attention to that help me to know, yes, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I think social media is another great example, right? I'm currently on 5 platforms. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, and TikTok. And I picked up TikTok and Instagram because people said to me, you need to be on these platforms. Well, I'm in a place now where I'm about to probably shed both of those platforms to be focused exclusively on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And I look at, and a lot of that is from, I mean, even down to SEO, right? To managing SEO, because SEO on each of those platforms is different. And I don't have the capacity or the bandwidth to manage the specificity of SEO requirements that are changing on 5 different platforms, right? So part of that is getting down to a management structure that I can handle, but I don't feel like I'm not sure that my audience that I'm trying to reach is on TikTok or Instagram, or my energy is better spent focusing on 3 primary platforms. And I know that if that's what I'm meant to do, what the universe wants me to do, I will make the final decision to shed those 2 platforms, or maybe it's others, and focus, and my resources will continue to help me focus on the ones that I know that I'm supposed to be on. And the other thing that I know about that is that if I decide to shed those, that is divinely ordained, and that's okay, because the people that God wants to find me are going to find me in other ways, right? Whether it's those platforms, hear me on your show, whatever it is, right? And so I don't allow myself to get constrained by but like, what about all the millions, maybe a billion people now more that are on TikTok or on Instagram, right? Okay, well, I'm not trying to have, I do want everybody in the world to hear my message, right? But I know that's going to happen in other organic ways that I will be led to. And so I really have tried to pay attention to that. And that's led me down this journey, and, it wasn't until February of this year that I actually spent time with one of my coaches, again, somebody who came into my life, who I knew she came in at the right time when I was ready to receive her and what she could teach me. And I worked with her for about 4 months. And then in February, had a one-to-one session with her. And that's when I finally had my epiphany about how I am going to put my revenue generating products out into the world,
Mm.
right? So previously, everything that I created is pretty much for free. You get my book, you have to buy my book, although I give it away a whole lot to people who I meet. I don't see it as a money making venture for me. It's about spreading my message. And that's one of the reasons why I give it away just as much as people will buy it. Obviously, if I don't know you, you're going to buy it, right? To hear what I have to say or read what I have to say. Getting, my show is for free, right? And then I'm all over social media talking all the time. So what I give away on social media is free, right? Talking about healing all the time and showing how it works in my life and how it can work for all of us, right? But I can't, I'm not independently wealthy, so I do have to figure out how to sustain myself from a business standpoint, right? And to run a business, which, every business is there having income coming in, whether you're profit or, a for-profit or a nonprofit, you still need to have revenue coming in to pay the bills, right? And your expenses and all that, right? And so figuring out that path for me, I really didn't even have to come to my own understanding of what my revenue generating products were until I had this session with her in February. And then it became abundantly clear to me. And I spent the next few months creating what is I now call the Empowered Survivor's Journey, which has I've got it's either an hour-long self-study video that you can watch yourself about sort of the introduction to the HEAL framework is what I call it. You can hear me talking about how the HEAL framework, how it works and what you learn through that framework. I also do that in a live setting where you can watch the video and then spend 90 minutes with me just in Q&A. You can hear me talk more deeply about the HEAL framework. And then you can ask me anything if you're just curious about whether or not does this work for me? Like, is this something that I should try? Should I work with you, right? Do I want to work with you, Beth, as the healing mentor, right? That's what it's meant to do. And then, as soon as I finished that, then I went on to build the masterclass, which I, completed the masterclass just at the end of June. And I'm in the process of actually launching that and getting it out and putting my first cohort out into the world to work with that. That is a 16-week deep dive into the HEAL framework where I take people through really learning how to build their own skill set through their own journey with hope, building hope, learning how to foster hope, figuring out what healing resources and tools work uniquely for them. How do you put those together to do the deep self-discovery work? What do you need to do in the deep and doing some of the deep self-discovery work, and then working with people on trying to really understand the notion of love and what do you do with first of all, how you're loving yourself. Then what do you do with relationships that you're already in that are unhealthy, identifying those and figuring out how you're going to deal with those when they are causing you pain, and then learning how to really foster the ones that are our healthy relationships that really are the ones that we should be pouring our energy into, right? And so the masterclass is that process of teaching people how to go through that, which I see as really building a skill set to learn how to heal so that you have those tools on board as you continue to experience your life in relationships with people and deal with hurts that will come in the future, just in human to human interaction. That's been the evolution of getting there. And, you know, I'm in that place now where I'm just trying to actually get people to say, yes, I want to work with you, which maybe somebody that's listening or watching will say that.
Yeah,
Yes, I want to work
we'll
with you.
share the link on the description for anyone who also wants to join. Yes, please go ahead
Yeah,
to
you can
click the
find me all
link.
over. Yeah, yeah, that'll be great. Thank you. I appreciate that very much.
Beth, you also mentioned using Claude AI to actually facilitate with
Yes.
your content creation. How has this technology actually helped in your creation process? And also, are you looking to also add in any other areas to leverage technology of AI?
Yeah. So, you know, in my former, you know, one of the core things that I dealt with in my former career was regulatory compliance. And as I was leaving, of course, this whole idea, I left about a year after really in the forefront of some of the regulatory discussions was the notion of regulating AI globally, right? And so my introduction to AI was really from that standpoint and about the power that's there. And you know, I've lived in the data and analytics world for many, many years in my former career, and there's a natural connection there between data and analytics and now what we're doing with AI, right? So watching that come together, I've seen that, you know, and I understand the power of what we can get out of analyzing and managing data in a responsible way, right? I understand that, you know, and then the whole idea of AI regulation started to be a
Mm,
conversation, which we're still having today, right? And so my experience was not personal. It was really at a business level and how my clients were using and beginning to use AI, right? And this whole discussion
mm,
around regulation. My own experience, I'm using Claude, you know, and I am, you know, and I come from professional services and I work with a lot of lawyers for many years. And so when you had law firms that were dealing with the challenges of briefs being written by AI that were citing cases that didn't even exist, right? So you had people in law firms that were putting these briefs out in courts, and this was happening here in the US. And, you know, they didn't go check the sites that the AI tools were using to build these really fantastical briefs, right? They didn't do the work to check the sources and got it was pretty embarrassing, right? When you've got a brief in front
yeah,
of a court and you don't have it's not a real source, right? It's not a real case that ever happened. And so I've seen all of that, right? And so the idea of being very source aware in more
yes,
open AI platforms, I just come from that environment, right? And so, you know, my own use of AI was quite guarded because I was like, well, I'm trying to figure out again, how does AI work for me, right? And if it's a tool I'm meant to use, I'm going to figure it out. Well, in my journey recently, and this happened last year, people talking about AI more and more and more, and solopreneurs or entrepreneurs that I now spend a lot of time with, and many that they're resources, gurus, guides for me, right? And I really respect their work, start talking about it. And Claude came up. And because Claude is closed loop, I can protect my own proprietary creation, my work, right? So what I feed into Claude is entirely my work. It has my book. I've taken everything on my website and printed it into PDF, right? So I've created the foundation for Claude, right? My blog posts that are out there. Sometimes I will take transcripts from my recordings and load that up in there. I'm now, you know, on a regular basis, I mentioned SEO and I'm trying to learn SEO on the different platforms. I have somebody I work with on my YouTube channel to do the SEO for me, but I'm trying to mimic what he does. And so when I go to write a post for social media, I'll write it and then I'll take it and I'll stick it into Claude and I'll say, okay, now go get me 20 hashtags that are trending right now related to what I've just written. And then it will give me those. And then I'll look at them when I'm putting into social media about how it's performing and whether I actually want to use the hashtag or not. And maybe
yeah,
some I accept, some I don't, some I put in my own that I think need to be there, right? So that's kind of the way that I'm using it. I've found it very powerful once it learns me, and I've learned how to talk to Claude to really be able to help me. I mean, I used it a lot to help me create the masterclass because I know what I wanted to teach. I know what I wanted the modules to be, but you know, I need ideas for hope building exercises, right? And so I say this, you know, give me 8 ideas for hope building exercises. And here they come. And then I look at those and I'm like, I like that. Let's do something with that, right? And so then I would take it and create my own exercise based on what Claude had suggested to me. Rarely I have said to Claude, go out to the internet and
Yeah.
bring me back. I'm looking for a quote, an inspirational quote around X. It's okay to go out to the internet and look at books or whatever and bring this back to me. Right. And so occasionally I will do that. I have played around a little bit with Chat GPT personally, and I've had people that I've worked with who have engaged with Chat GPT to basically diagnose their emotional state and tell them what they need to do. That really scares me, because the whole AI regulation, I'm aware of some cases where AI got out of control and what it was telling people to do, and was telling people to do some really dangerous things after some communication interaction. It was on an unregulated product, right? I mean, there was not a good compliance structure or framework around the particular product that was out in the public, which is one of the cases that sort of led to this conversation around AI, the need for AI regulation, right? And I have a family member who was reading to me a dialogue that this person was having with ChatGPT about where they were emotionally and what it was suggesting. And some of it I was like, wow, that's like really good and it's really powerful. But then I could also see that some of it was dangerous. And I felt like as that evolved over time, ChatGPT almost got frustrated with this person and was like, well, I'm just going to tell you this to stop this conversation. We'll just go do this. That's what I felt like was happening, right? And so I'm aware of those types of things. And so that makes me nervous in a platform like ChatGPT, right? And so not wanting to get in trouble for plagiarism and stealing anybody else's. I mean, I've asked Claude before when Claude's given me some of these ideas, right? And I'm like, did you plagiarize this? Like, I want to know your sources. And did you plagiarize this, right?
Always
Because I'm
ask
like,
for the
where is it?
source.
Always, right? And I'm getting that feedback. And Claude does not like it when I ask it if it's plagiarizing, of course, but then it will say to me, this is where it comes from, right? It's my own knowledge base, or yes, these sources, right? Whatever it may be, right? So I do use it, but I'm trying to be very responsible with my use. And I also want to protect my own IP, right? I don't want my intellectual property out available in an open AI platform, which is why I've chosen Claude and only selectively use ChatGPT when I think it can help me to go do something that is probably not directly related to my work that I'm doing. But, I mean, that's that. And then the whole other world that I've come into is, it is like sort of graphical content creation, right? So video production, recording, I do it through Zoom. I've had to get good at Zoom. I use a product called Descript that helps me to clean up videos and strip out clips and sort of, clean up whatever I want to clean up. And I use Canva. I do all my graphics myself, right? I have new project management tools that I use that I could have used in my former career, but I've learned to use those tools. So there've been a whole of what we would put in that category of sort of technology. A lot of that is AI assisted, right? And so there is, a lot of that I have learned and like literally learned to use this stuff in the last year, 18 months as I was launching my book and then, now managing my business and creating the work that I create. So for anybody who's out there.
Yes, love that. Thank you so much, Beth. And yeah, what I learned is that you have to use technology responsibly and also know what is the context for using it, right? Don't just let AI run the test for you. You have to set your own framework.
Yes.
So thank you so
I love
much
that
for
word
this
context.
conversation.
You have to know the context, right? I love that. And so I'm happy to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
Where can people find you online, Beth?
You can find me on the internet. My website is empoweredsurvivors with an S on the end.com. That's my website. And on the social media platforms that I mentioned. So it's YouTube, which is where my YouTube channel is, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and TikTok. My social media handle is at Beth Jones Healing Mentor on all 5 platforms.
And all the links will be actually provided on the description. So if anyone wants to contact Beth, please go ahead and click any of the links right there. So that's all for today's episode of Rise with AI. A huge thank you to Beth for actually sharing her transformative journey and also insights into empowering survivors through healing. So listeners, if this episode inspired you, share it with someone who needs to hear. And don't forget to subscribe for more conversations with leaders in the e-learning and professional training. Until next time, keep reaching, inspecting, scaling, and empowering. See you guys next time.